The circle tightens. The battlefield stank of smoke and scorched blood. Kaela of the Varresh speed tribes pressed her back to a jagged ridge of stone, her lungs burning, her arms trembling from hours of endless combat. The cries of a fallen kin still echoed in her ears. Around her lay the wreckage of a world, shattered banners, broken shields, and the mangled corpses of warriors who had sworn to never yield. The Karn Dominion had come at dawn, as they always did, in precise ranks of steel and flame. Their war machines screeched across the valley floor, cutting down Varresh fighters like dry grass before a wildfire. For every Karn soldier that fell, 3 more replaced him. Kaela had fought until her arms shook, until her hands bled, until the sacred spear passed from mother to daughter for 10 generations splintered in her grasp. Now she held only a jagged shaft, useless against the circle tightening around her. The Dominion advanced with clinical patience. Their armored boots struck the ground in perfect rhythm, a living wall of metal closing in. She could see her reflection in their glassy visors. A lone alien woman, hair matted with blood, clutching a broken relic, a flicker of defiance and eyes rimmed with despair. Kaela raised the broken spear anyway. Varresh law was clear. Better to die encircled with weapon in hand than to fall crawling in the dirt. Death would come, but it would not find her kneeling. She set her jaw, steadied her breathing, and whispered the final warrior's prayer to herself. The Dominion commander raised a gauntleted hand. The line of soldiers halted, rifles ready. Kaela could hear the faint hum of their energy cores, the low growl of their machines. The commander tilted his head, studying her as one might a dying animal. "End it," Kaela whispered. But before the order could fall, the sky screamed. A streak of fire tore through the clouds, burning brighter than any weapon she had seen. Dominion soldiers faltered, turning their visors upward. For an instant, Kaela thought the gods had answered her prayer with fire from the heavens. The object struck the valley floor behind the Dominion ranks with a thunderous impact that split the earth. Shockwaves knocked soldiers from their feet, rattled armor, and sent plumes of dust billowing across the battlefield. Kaela threw herself flat, grit stinging her eyes, her ears ringing with the roar of something breaking the world apart. Silence followed, heavy and tense. From the crater rose a smoking capsule, blackened by re-entry heat. Panels hissed open, releasing jets of steam. The Dominion soldiers regrouped, weapons swinging toward the unknown. Kaela's heart pounded, not from fear, but from something deeper. She had heard the old stories whispered around Varresh fires, stories of creatures from beyond the stars. Deathworlders, beasts said to be too wild, too savage to exist in civilized space. The capsule's hatch blew open. A figure stumbled out, coughing through smoke. Humanoid, but taller, broader, clad in battered armor patched with strange markings. The figure removed a scorched helmet, revealing a sweat-soaked face, eyes bright and sharp even under the weight of exhaustion. A human. Kaela's breath caught. The Dominion soldiers froze, recognition, or perhaps disbelief, spreading across their ranks. The human straightened, brushing dust from his armor, then looked at the encircled warrior. Despite the blood streaking his cheek and the weariness in his movements, a crooked grin formed across his face. He hefted a weapon Kaela did not recognize, some brutal hybrid of steel and fire, and pointed it toward the Dominion. "Mind if I join the fight?" he asked. The words meant nothing to Kaela's ears, but the tone, the reckless, almost amused defiance, pierced through language itself. For the first time that day, Kaela felt her grip on despair loosen. The Dominion broke formation, weapons flashing to ready. The commander barked an order, sharp and furious. But the human was already moving, charging forward with the madness of a predator loosed from its cage. Energy bolts ricocheted around him as he weaved through fire, closing the distance far too quickly for machines built on precision. Kaela found herself standing again, broken spear still clutched in hand. Something in her blood screamed at her not to let this stranger face the impossible alone. With a cry that tore her throat raw, she hurled herself back into the fight. The circle had not yet closed, and perhaps, with this fireborn warrior at her side, it never would. Deathworlder tactics. The human fought like no creature Kaela had ever seen. Where the Karn soldiers moved in drilled formations, every step measured, every strike rehearsed, the human was chaos embodied. He ducked beneath incoming fire, rolled through the date, and struck with brutal precision, as if each movement were born not from training but from pure instinct. His weapon, short, ugly, and loud, spat fire that tore holes through Karn armor. Kaela, still clutching the haft of her broken spear, followed his wake. Where he created openings, she slipped through, striking down distracted soldiers with desperate thrusts. Together, without words or plan, they carved a ragged path through the Dominion lines until the surviving Karn scattered, leaving their commander sprawled in the dust. For the first time in hours, silence returned. The human leaned against a boulder, breathing hard, helmet tucked under his arm. His eyes darted around the field, sharp and restless, as though expecting more enemies to appear at any moment. Kaela staggered closer, her body trembling from exhaustion. She wanted to speak, to ask what he was, why he had come, but the words caught in her throat. His presence alone was an answer to old fireside tales. The human noticed her watching. He tapped his chest. "Elias," he said slowly. Then he pointed at her. She hesitated, then tapped her own chest. "Kaela." He nodded, the faintest smile flickering. At least names could be shared, even if little else could. A low rumble carried across the valley. Kaela's head snapped toward the horizon. Columns of Karn reinforcements marching with relentless precision. The Dominion did not tolerate disruption. Soon, the circle would close again, larger and tighter. Elias followed her gaze. Instead of fear, his expression sharpened into something dangerously close to amusement. He muttered a string of sounds Kaela couldn't grasp, then gestured toward the rocky hills at the valley's edge. His meaning was clear. Move. She hesitated. Varresh warriors did not flee, but something in the human's confidence, reckless though it was, pulled her forward. Together they stumbled into the crags, slipping through narrow gullies until the sound of marching faded behind stone walls. When they finally stopped, Kaela sank against the rocks, her chest heaving. Elias crouched nearby, scanning the ridges, checking strange instruments strapped to his arm. His armor was battered, his weapon scorched, yet his movements carried no weariness. Kaela's voice was hoarse. "My spear is broken. My people are gone. I am nothing." Elias glanced at her, frowning at the unfamiliar words. Still, he seemed to understand enough. He picked up a small stone, snapped it in half between scarred hands, then tossed the fragments aside. He tapped her chest with a gloved finger. "Not broken," he said firmly. Then he tapped his own chest. "Alive." She stared at him, confused, until his meaning sank in. Weapons could fail, but the warrior endured. Before she could reply, a sharp crack echoed from above. A Karn patrol scanned the cliffs. Elias reacted instantly, motioning for silence. He crept forward, silent as a hunting beast, then ambushed the patrol with a ferocity that left Kaela frozen. He didn't fight like a soldier. He fought like something born from a world that had tried to kill him every day of his life. When the skirmish ended, Elias returned, wiping blood from his face. He crouched before her, meeting her eyes with that same reckless grin. Kaela finally understood why the Dominion feared the word deathworlder. They pressed deeper into the hills, finding a cave to shelter in. Kaela bound her wounds with strips of cloth while Elias rummaged through his pack, producing strange tools, ration bars, and metal canisters of water. He offered some to her, and though the taste was bitter, it steadied her. Through gestures and crude drawings scratched into date, Elias explained. He had come from the sky, part of a force scattered after a battle gone wrong. Alone, he had followed distress signals until his drop pod had burned into her battlefield. Kaela listened, absorbing fragments she barely understood. One thing was clear. This human had not come for her people. His arrival was chance. And yet, he had stood at her side when death closed in. The rumble of Karn war engines echoed faintly in the distance. Elias studied the sound, then looked at her with sharp eyes. He mimed a camp, soldiers, lines of march. Then he pointed at himself, then her, and made a slicing gesture across his throat. He wasn't suggesting retreat. He was suggesting attack. Kaela stared at him in disbelief. The Karn were countless, their machines vast. To strike at their camp was madness. Yet Elias only grinned, as though madness were his native tongue. And for the first time since her spear had shattered, Kaela felt the faint stirrings of hope. Fire in the sky. The Karn Dominion believed in inevitability. Their armies marched in endless columns, machines grinding forward with mathematical precision. Villages burned, tribes broke, and resistance always collapsed beneath their sheer weight. Kaela had once believed this too. The Dominion was a storm, unstoppable, merciless. Her people could only meet it with honor before they were washed away. But the human, Elias, defied inevitability. In the days that followed their escape into the hills, Kaela watched him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Where she had seen only overwhelming force, he saw opportunities hidden in shadows and stones. Where she expected retreat, he demanded resistance. It began with whispers to the scattered survivors. Broken Varresh warriors who had fled the battlefield, ashamed to still live, now found themselves staring at the stranger who had fallen from the sky. Elias gathered them with a voice full of conviction, though few understood his words. His gestures, his fire, his sheer refusal to accept defeat, those spoke louder than language. At first they looked to Kaela. She had been chieftain's daughter, last bearer of the spear. And though her weapon lay shattered, she nodded. If this deathworlder believed they could strike back, she would follow him. Training began at dusk. Elias showed them how to move silently across rocks, how to set snares with scrap metal and cord, how to watch for patterns in the Dominion patrols. He taught them to strike not with honor, but with cunning, to ambush, to vanish, to make the enemy bleed fair. Kaela's people were hunters by tradition, their ancestors stalking the great thunder beasts of their plains. Under Elias's guidance, that instinct became something sharper, crueler. At first it felt dishonorable. The Varresh had always prized direct combat, face to face. But Elias spoke through action. One ambush against a patrol left half a dozen Karn dead without a single Varresh casualty. When Kaela saw her warriors return alive, carrying captured rifles and armor, she understood. Honor meant nothing if her people were ashes. Survival was the truest form of defiance. Around campfires, Kaela began to see beyond the fighter. Elias told stories in fragments, with gestures and halting words. Earth, he called his home, a place of storms, deserts, oceans, and jungles, each more dangerous than the last. A world that tried to kill its children every day, and yet they survived. They thrived. Deathworld, he said once, tapping his chest, then the dirt. Home. Kaela looked at him with new respect. No wonder his kind fought like predators. To endure such a world was to forge warriors stronger than steel. The resistance grew bold. Under moonlight, they raided supply convoys, sabotaged machines, and spread terror in the Dominion camps. Kaela herself led strikes, her broken spear reforged with scavenged metal into a new weapon. It was heavier, rougher than the original, but it carried both her people's spirit and the human's ingenuity. Each victory, no matter how small, rippled across the tribes. Refugees returned from hiding, whispering of the warrior from the sky and the daughter of the Varresh who still fought. For the first time in generations, hope stirred. But the Karn were not fools. One night, as the resistance struck a supply depot, the earth trembled with a march of titans. Towering war machines, mechs of steel and fire, emerged from the dark, their eyes glowing like suns. Elias cursed, shoving Kaela behind cover as beams of energy tore the depot apart. Even he looked grim then. His weapons could shred infantry, but against walking fortresses, he had little answer. The Varresh scattered into the hills, many cut down by burning lances of light. Kaela fought to rally them, but despair clawed at her throat once more. When they finally escaped, panting and blooded, Elias slammed a fist into the stone wall of their cave, frustration burning in his eyes. Kaela had no need of translation to know what he felt. Against such machines, their resistance was a spark against a storm. But Elias was not one to surrender. He activated a device strapped to his wrist, a beacon that pulsed with steady light. Kaela frowned, asking silently what it meant. He looked at her, then to the stars above, and smiled despite the blood on his lips. "Help," he said simply. Then, tapping the sky, "Humans." Kaela followed his gaze upward. At first there was only darkness, endless and indifferent. But hours later, the heavens themselves seemed to answer. The sky began to burn. Streaks of fire, dozens this time, cut through the night, dropships descending, their engines howling. The Karn, so certain of their inevitability, faltered as alarms blared through their camps. Kaela's heart thundered in her chest. She had thought Elias a miracle alone. But now she realized he was only the beginning. The deathworlders were coming, encircled no more. The dawn broke red over the valley, but the color came not from the sun. The sky itself burned with streaking fire, trails of human dropships carving through clouds like spears hurled from the heavens. The Karn Dominion, once steady in their iron certainty, now wavered. Their camps blared with alarms, soldiers scrambling to form ranks, war machines stomping to readiness. But even their discipline could not disguise the ripple of fear. The deathworlders had come, not in legend, but in steel and flesh. Kaela stood atop a ridge with Elias at her side, her newly forged spear gleaming with morning light. Below, the valley seethed with chaos, human dropships slamming into the ground, armored figures pouring forth, weapons roaring like thunder. Elias laughed, a sound wild and sharp, and clapped her on the shoulder. She did not understand the words he shouted, but she understood the fire in his eyes. "Together," she said in her own tongue, gripping her spear tighter. He nodded. The battle that followed was like nothing Kaela had ever witnessed. Where the Karn advanced in rigid lines, the humans crashed into them like storms. They fought in squads, each soldier moving with terrifying autonomy, covering one another, improvising in ways the Dominion could not predict. Energy beams split the air, grenades thundered, and rifles spat fury. The Dominion war machines, towering and invincible, turned their lances of fire on the human landing zones. One dropship vanished in an explosion that shook the ground. Kaela's heart clenched, but then Elias was already moving, shouting to her, signaling. He charged not away from the mechs, but toward them. Kaela followed. The resistance warriors joined them, Varresh hunters darting between rocks, striking at Karn infantry with stolen rifles and blades. Kaela felt her blood surge as old chants rose from her throat, war cries echoing across the valley. No longer broken, no longer encircled, her people were fighting as one again. Elias led them to the flank of a mech, its towering frame distracted by the thunder of human heavy guns. He scaled the rubble of a shattered wall with reckless ease, slamming a device against the machine's joint. Sparks erupted as the charge detonated, blowing a leg apart. The mech staggered, fire belching from its ruined limb. Kaela hurled her spear with all her strength. The reforged weapon, half tradition and half deathworld metal, pierced through a weak joint in the cockpit plating. The machine toppled, crashing into the earth. The cheer that rose from her people was like a second sunrise. All around, the tide shifted. The Dominion, so used to crushing resistance, now faced chaos on every front. Humans tearing through their formations, Varresh striking from shadows, every movement unpredictable and merciless. Their command channels broke with static and screams. Kaela fought beside Elias, every swing of her spear matched by the bark of his rifle. For the first time, she did not feel like a relic fighting for scraps. She felt like a warrior of something new, Varresh pride forged together with human defiance. Hours passed in fire and blood. By midday, the Dominion lines broke. Their soldiers fled into the hills, their surviving machines retreating under the weight of relentless pursuit. The valley floor was a ruin of smoke and shattered steel, but it belonged not to the Karn, nor to despair, but to those who had refused to die. Kaela stood on the ridge again, her chest heaving, her spear blackened at the tip. Around her, the survivors of her tribe embraced one another, tears mixing with war paint. Human soldiers moved among them, offering water, patches of aid, and tired smiles. Elias leaned against a boulder, armor scorched, face streaked with blood and dust. Yet when he saw her, his grin returned, irrepressible as ever. She approached, lifting her spear. "Not broken," she said slowly, repeating his words from before. "Alive." His grin widened, and though he may not have understood her tongue, he understood her meaning. For the first time since the Dominion's shadow had fallen across her world, Kaela felt certainty, not in death, but in tomorrow. The Varresh would rebuild. They would stand, and they would not stand alone. Elias raised his weapon skyward in a weary salute. "Told you," he said with a chuckle. "You weren't done yet." The circle was broken, and a new one had begun.